And yes, Bianca. All right. Well, welcome, Joe. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Good afternoon. Yep, I am in Houston, Texas right now. If we would have done this last week, I would have been in Star City, Russia. But I'm back here in Houston. I do have a short presentation. Being a former school teacher, I hope not to talk too much, but have time for us to kind of have a dialogue, answer questions. Let's see if I can start with a short video. Just this is one that's out there, and let's try that. Alright. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
All right. So this is us having pizza night on the International Space Station. So kind of not a typical Saturday night, but there's a lot of science going on there in the making of a pizza with things floating around, but yet not going all over the place. A couple of our Russian crew members are up there with us making pizza in a uh, little suitcase oven. But it's fun to do in space, and you'll see us cutting with scissors instead of a knife. Um, some challenges with eating food in space, and that's the Russian pizza, 100% meat. And then, of course, the Italian astronaut had to make the fancier pizza. So, just something to get us started. And I will get rid of that. And let's see. Can you see this PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right. Let me see if I can. All right. That looks normal to you all?
Looks good.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So I was born in Inglewood, California. And I guess now that you're sharing this, recording it, it'll all get out there. That's what I looked like coming out, born in Southern California. I did grow up in Anaheim, California. My parents still live there, so really close to where you all are at right now. Growing up, just enjoyed sports, spent a lot of time Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, hanging out in the summertime. I have a bachelor's degree in geology from the University of California in Santa Barbara. This picture was taken after my master's degree from the University of Arizona, also in geology. Those are my grandparents there. My parents were born in Puerto Rico. They did the somewhat typical migration from Puerto Rico to New York, and then ended up in California, where me and my brothers and sister were born. And so, really, my grandfather, you see there, he's the one that kind of got me motivated into the sciences. And my grandmother, she passed away maybe a year or so ago at the age of 99. And it was just fun being in space, talking to her. And I'm sure that was quite the experience for her to have a discussion with her grandson up in space. While I was in college, joined the Marine Corps Reserves and did that for 6 years. And then before I became a NASA astronaut, I was a school teacher out in Florida. And so that's kind of what I looked like before, well, when I was younger and before I got to NASA. And I just wanted to share kind of how I got here and, my story. And I kind of characterize this as some of the bad choices that I've made in life. And so some of you may be making some of these right now. In high school, I was pretty fortunate that we had metal shop as an elective. And so I chose to take, every year that we could take that elective, I took metal shop. And a lot of people were telling me, you got to diversify, take different classes, but I really enjoyed it. So I did that all 4 years in high school. So those of you that are joining us today. You're making a smart decision already, going to school. But when I was in high school, I did not want to go to college. I just wanted to get out and start making money. And I thought there were better ways to do that than going to college. I had a nice discussion with my dad, who kind of convinced me that I should do it for at least a year, and then we'll see how it went. And of course, I ended up loving it, especially living in Santa Barbara. Joining the Marine Corps, that's never a good thing for the parents, especially the mothers. And so they weren't too happy when I did that. I did, when I graduated with my master's degree in geology, I was working as a hydrogeologist out in Burbank. And I did that for about maybe a year or two. And then I quit my job to become a Peace Corps volunteer. So I did that for a little over 2 years in the Dominican Republic. But you all know what it means to volunteer, which means you don't really get paid. So my dad wasn't super happy about that decision. After that, I ended up moving to the Bahamas and managing a research center out there. And people are like, "What are you, crazy, moving out there to this small island?" And then finally, one of the biggest mistakes at the time that considered a mistake was me becoming a school teacher. We all know that school teachers don't get paid a lot of money. They work really hard. In my opinion, one of the most important jobs out there. But at the time, people are like, "What are you doing, with a master's degree and you're out there teaching school?" So all of the things that at the time, I was kind of getting criticized as not the best choices in life. And so how did I get to where I am today? That's what I looked like back in 2004 when I was selected. So when I look back, people always ask me, "How did you get hired out of all the people that apply?" I kind of reflect on what I did in the past. And in my interview, I was surprised that in a 1 hour interview, we probably spent 30 minutes of it talking about, where I grew up, what I did in high school. So we spent a lot of time talking about these 4 years of metal shop. When you go up to the International Space Station, a lot of what you do is maintenance work up there, doing science maintenance. So you have to be able to turn a wrench. You have to be able to work with your hands. And having that experience was super helpful. Being in the Marine Corps gave me a lot of operational experience, which is super helpful when you're going up into space with a crew. Being a Peace Corps volunteer, I think they really liked that because it showed that I had some experience working with other countries, and I was able to work independently. Uh, Going up to the International Space Station, like you saw in that video, we fly with the Russians, we have Europeans, Canadians, Japanese. So it is really an international endeavor. Working in the Bahamas is not a lot different than working on the International Space Station, where you're very isolated. So I think that was a really good experience. And then being a school teacher to me is one of the most beneficial um, jobs out there. To become an astronaut, you're able to adapt. You can kind of think on your feet. When a plan doesn't work out well, the teachers know how to adapt and make things work out okay. So, things that at the time people thought were bad decisions in my life, when you look back, they ended up, working out okay. And I guess the message is that, do things that you enjoy doing and just keep taking steps kind of in a forward direction. And so where you all are at, a lot of you, the students today, you're making decisions today that are going to impact your life a little bit later. So do what you like, but try to make smart choices that are going in the right direction. Um, like it was mentioned, I have 3 space flights. The first one was on Space Shuttle Discovery back in 2009. That's the top right picture. And like I said, I'm Puerto Rican, and anybody who knows a Puerto Rican knows that we love our Puerto Rican flag. So on all of my missions, I ended up taking that with me, and that's what you see in that top photo. That's the mid deck of the space shuttle. And then I've flown twice with the Russians on a Russian Soyuz for a long duration missions. That's the Expedition 31, 32. and 53, 54. Very cool. We have to learn how to speak Russian. We spent a lot of time out there training. Just a great experience. And then some of the shorter missions that I've had that are not leaving Earth, but one of them was off the coast of Florida. It was called Sea Test. Sometimes you might see it as Nemo. And what that is kind of an analog type mission where we were living underground or underwater for about 5 days in that capsule that you see there with the individuals on the inside. And what you're doing is kind of simulating being in space. So we did uh, mock spacewalks, putting on the helmets and all of that. So really a great experience to work with the crew in a unique environment. And then a couple of years ago, I spent 5 days in a cave in Slovenia, and I'm not a caver, so that was a very unique experience. It was an international crew. We had a Russian, a German, the Japanese, and a couple of Americans, and a Canadian. And it was just, an incredible experience. And the skills that we kind of learned and shared living in a cave is very similar to, how we live in kind of the rough environment of space. So that's kind of why we do those analog missions. So those are the big ones that I've had, and I will kind of stop there. Right now, let me get rid of this. So my jobs now, of course, here in Houston. I was in Russia a couple of weeks ago, and I'll be going back, and that's supporting the crew members that are training with the Russians to fly on the Soyuz. And right now, I'm working on with the crew of the next NASA SpaceX mission that's going to launch on October the 30th. So working with them, putting their schedule together. Getting ready to fly them out to Florida here in a few weeks. And then shortly after that launch, I'll be supporting the landing of the SpaceX crew that is currently on orbit right now. And they launched about 5 months ago. And they'll be splashing down right around the first week of November. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. And after they land, I'll likely go back to Russia to support folks that'll be out there later in the year. So it was kind of quick, but I just wanted to give you that background. And with that, I will open it up to any questions you might have. So we'll see where this goes.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe. We appreciate that. So we have a couple questions that we're going to start with. And then if anyone in the audience has questions, keep them in mind and we will get to them. So Joe, our first question is, do you anticipate returning on a mission to space anytime soon? And if so, or if not, what would your ultimate mission be?
So I would love to go back into space. I think most people that have gone really enjoy it, and you kind of appreciate the moment because you never know when you're going to go back. So I would love to go back into space. I'm not currently assigned to a mission. So we'll see how that goes. It could be potentially back to the International Space Station. But when you talk about my dream mission, when I was a kid, my grandfather that you saw, he had old film of the Apollo missions, and he would show that. And so that really, I think, is what inspired me to even think about going into space. And so now with the Artemis program, we're looking at going back to the moon. We're going to be there for a longer period of time. We're going to have the first woman to walk on the moon, the first person of color to walk on the moon. So if you're talking for me, the ultimate mission would be go doing a little moonwalk and taking a trip to the moon. That'd be pretty sweet. And then maybe for the folks that are listening that are a little bit younger, maybe some of you will be going to Mars, but I think that's a little bit down the road for me. So if I could get a moon mission, that would be awesome.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next question is, can you explain the experience of your first mission and being able to look out towards Earth from space? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? And same with your first spacewalk.
Yeah, well, that's it's super hard to describe. We take a lot of pictures when we're in space because, when you're looking at it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and you want to share it with everybody. Um, and so, if you go out and look at photos from space, it's pretty amazing, but it looks way better when you're there. If any of you have ever gone somewhere like the Grand Canyon, you can look at pictures of the Grand Canyon, but until you're standing on the edge and looking out, you really can't appreciate it. So um, it's a cool feeling on your first flight, especially being lucky enough to fly on a space shuttle. You're laying on your back for a few hours. You've been training with your crew, almost every day for almost 2 years. So you're kind of excited. You're not really scared, but you're super, super excited for that day. The launch is, just super amazing. Um, but the first time when you first get to space and you take off your seatbelt and then you start to float, you just can't believe it because you really can't train for that on Earth. And the space shuttle had, looking back, pretty small windows. But the first time you saw the Earth, you're like, what? You just couldn't believe it. I mean, it's just this incredible view, and it's just the most amazing thing ever. And when you get to the space station, we have what's called the cupola, and that's just a big 360-degree window where you can see the entire Earth. And so that view it's pretty sweet. And so you get a better appreciation for the planet when you see that. So if anybody gets the opportunity to go to space, I highly recommend it. It's totally awesome. It's exciting, and just the best views. Floating in space is great. Um, and then talking about a spacewalk, that's an interesting activity. It's something that I think everybody who goes to space wants to do. I won't lie, it's kind of scary. The first time you go out, the hatch opens up, and you may come out when it's daytime. It might be nighttime, and if it's daytime and you look down and you see the Earth 250 miles away, you're not going to fall, but your brain for a second is like, oh, wait a second, I don't want to let go. And so we actually put in the timeline about 5 to 10 minutes for somebody who's doing their first spacewalk, just to adapt. You connect a tether and then you kind of let go so you can, prove to yourself you're not going anywhere, even though you're not going anywhere. Uh, it's just a really interesting experience. And you're inside your spacesuit, and it's almost like a little spaceship that you're in. And so it's exciting. But it's very tiring because you're going to make mistakes. So you try to minimize that. But everything you do, you have to be very careful. You have to make sure you're tethered. Every tool you have is tethered. And so at the end of a 6, 7, 8 hour spacewalk, you're definitely spent and tired. It's tough, but it's fun.
Sounds like an incredible experience. Um, our next question comes from Madison DeVries, and she is wondering how challenging was the training process to become an astronaut? And we're going to couple that with a question from Alice Yoon. Her first question is, um, especially since you were in your mid 30s potentially when I don't know, like what did that look like different? Because you didn't go straight into the program, if that makes sense.
So that second part, I'm not sure if I got the second part. I got the first part. How about I do the first one, then we'll go to that second one.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So, it was interesting because I was, like I said, a school teacher before I came to NASA, and I was, in I think my mid 30s when I first got hired. And so I went from being a teacher to now becoming a student, and it was hard. It was definitely challenging. There's no one thing that is super hard, but learning how to just the basics of being an astronaut, there's just a lot that you have to learn. And so you're getting a little bit about how the space shuttle works, a little bit about the space station. You're learning how to do a spacewalk. You're learning how to fly the robotic arm. We have to fly a T-38 trainer jet as part of our, kind of everyday training. So there was just so much coming in pretty quickly that it was challenging. And it's about 18 months to 2 years just for the basic astronaut training. And then we call them astronaut candidates. And then once you pass that, then you're eligible to be assigned to a mission. And then you're looking at about another 2 years of training beyond that. So from when you get hired, if you were lucky and you went straight through, it's going to be at least 4 years of training that you need before you can go into space. So it's a lot. It's challenging, but it's totally cool. I mean, you're training to go into space, so it's fun and it's hard, but it's fun. And I think it's like most things in life. If you have a job that you really enjoy, it's not really like a job, but it was definitely challenging.
Thank you. So Alice Yoon asks, how did you physically and mentally prepare? And then what was the most physically challenging thing for you becoming an astronaut?
Yeah, I think mentally we train a lot, and especially for things that could go wrong. So we're very well prepared, and so you feel really good about that. And we do things like flying in that T-38 jet, where that's real. If something goes wrong, you have to react, and so you kind of learn all of these little skills that you will use when you go into space. So mentally, that's kind of how you train, but we have what we call the vomit comet. We do these parabolas, and so you can float for like 30 seconds, and a lot of times you get sick, hence the name, the vomit comet. And so you can train a little bit about how it is to be in a microgravity feeling environment, but you can't train for what it's like to be in space. And so that's a challenge mentally when you get up there. You're there now, your pen is floating away, stuff's going all over the place. You got to keep everything kind of tied down, and so you learn that as you go. And then physically, I think it probably has to be training for a spacewalk. We have a huge pool out here. It's called the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, and you guys aren't too far away. So if you ever get a chance, once we get over some of the COVID restrictions, I recommend coming out here and visiting the Space Center. Um, but we have this huge swimming pool that has a model of the entire space station on the inside. And so we'll put on a spacesuit, they'll put us underwater, they'll weigh us out so that we're neutrally buoyant. So it's kind of that feeling that you'll get when you're in space, but you still have the friction of the water. And you go down at about 8:45 in the morning, and you come up at 3 in the afternoon. So you're in the suit all day long. The suit is pressurized, so every time you move your hands, it's hard. It's kind of like squeezing maybe a racquetball or a tennis ball. And so after 6 hours of that, you're pretty tired. So that is probably one of the most physically challenging things that we have to do. So it's definitely encouraged for us to stay healthy, work out, exercise, run, and do all of that. But again, it, you're training for cool stuff, so it's fun.
Yeah, that would make it worth it. I'm going to hand this over right now to Bianco Bravo to ask a few questions. Thank you, Joe.
Um, do you want me to ask questions from the chat or?
Go ahead and do a couple you're prepared first.
All right. So what do you think was the hardest part of your astronaut training?
Yeah, I think the hardest part again is just the amount of things that we have to learn. Um, it's just every day, almost all day, you're learning new things, and then you have to apply it. Um, and so it's kind of like being in school for another 4 years, learning new stuff every day. And it might be things that you've never studied before, and we have a lot of tests, exams, and all of that. So I think it's just the amount of things that we have to learn is what's really tough.
For our next question, what do you miss most about Earth when you're in space, and what do you miss most about space when you're on Earth?
Oh man, good question. I think when you're in space, I guess the right answer should be I miss my family, right? Because you want to make sure your family thinks you love them and all of that. So yeah, I do love my family, but I do, you miss your, that that human connection, but you're up there with your crew. But I think when you're up there for a long time, at least for me, I really missed the weather. When you're on the space station, you're pretty much in an air conditioned room for, up to 6 months or so. And, being someone who grew up in Southern California, I love the beach, I love the sun, I like being outside. My hobbies are things that are outdoors. And so that's what I really miss. When you land, after being up there for a while, if it's out in Kazakhstan, just when they open the hatch and you can feel, the wind, you can feel the sun. The second time I landed, it was in the middle of the winter, but even just being in the snow and feeling that was great. So I think that's what I miss the most when I'm in space. And then when I'm on Earth, man, just being up there, floating is cool. I mean, I grew up loving all the superheroes flying around and things like that. So you can do that while you're up there. And then just the view that you have is pretty amazing. So I definitely miss that because those are things that you just can't do here on Earth.
And then for our next question, what advice would you give to your pre-astronaut self since becoming an astronaut?
Man, these are hard questions. So my pre-self, I think that I would tell myself to continuously challenge, myself, do things that make you uncomfortable, not in a bad way, but things that you might think are too difficult. Do that because that's how you learn. That's how you learn what you're capable of doing. Where a lot of times we just want to be comfortable and, we do what we know we're good at. And so I would tell myself, try different things that might make you, push yourself a little bit more. And it just helps you grow. And I think it makes you a better person. So, you know, for those of you that are listening, just, try new things. And I'm not saying, things that are life threatening or anything like that, but just stuff that is just not your normal, whether, you're not great at playing an instrument, try that and push yourself and see if you can learn it. So just anything that is challenging, that's what I would tell myself to do more of that.
Okay, so now we're going to switch to some of the chat questions and then we're going to switch back to Cherie. So Christine asked, how did you decide to try to become an astronaut and what went into your thinking that made you believe that you could do it?
Yes, so it was interesting. I was, teaching school in Florida, super happy, and I loved my job. And I had a bunch of different jobs leading up to that, and I really enjoyed all the jobs that I had. But I thought teaching, that's kind of my passion, what I love to do, and this is what I'm going to do forever. And I came to school one day, and somebody told me that NASA was looking to hire educators to become full-time astronauts. Um, Probably before most of your times, we had the teacher in space program in which we were going to fly a teacher, go do one mission. It was Krista McAuliffe, and then she was going to come back and go back to the classroom, where now they wanted to hire some educators to become full-time astronauts. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So let me check that out. So I went on the internet and I kind of read the job description, what the requirements were, and I started looking at the requirements. I go, well, I've got a master's degree. That's great. Okay, I've done this, I've done that, and I started looking at what the requirements were, and I'm like, I've done a lot of that stuff, and it's really hard to become an astronaut. Not that we are these superhuman beings. It's just the number of people that apply, and we select so few. That you really don't think you're going to get hired. But at least I felt like, I've done some things in my life that I think would be beneficial to NASA. And, I'm checking some of those boxes. So, if I didn't apply, I'd never get hired. So I figured, why not apply and see how it goes? So again, if you don't try, it's never going to happen. But definitely didn't think I was going to get selected.
What a great experience. Our next question comes from Sophia. What is something that gives you trouble daily when on a mission?
Yeah, so really good question. When we're up there, our days are pretty packed. We get up at around 6 a.m. and our first meeting is at 7, and then the last meeting at the end of the day is around 7 p.m. And then you cook dinner and you do all the things that you do at night, when you come home from work. Uh, but the schedule is packed, and there's a red line that goes down the schedule, and that red line is just marching throughout the day. And you're watching that red line move while you're working on different activities. So your goal is to try to get everything done in a day. And it doesn't always happen. And then the mission control team, they'll redo the schedule for the next day. But that's challenging because you might go from working on plants that you're growing, and then next thing you know, you're doing an experiment that deals with fire, and then you have to go work out, and then you might have some medical tests that you have to do, an ultrasound on yourself. So you're going from all of these different activities back to back, and there's not a whole lot of time to get everything done. So that's challenging. And then at the same time, you're trying to minimize the number of mistakes that you make. And so you're concentrating on everything. Again, if you're dealing with a tool, you got to make sure you don't lose that tool, because now you got to go find it. And now you know that you're kind of wasting time on that activity you should be working on. So it's just at least 5 days a week that you're doing that. On the weekends, we get a little bit of time off, but it's just that daily grind of all the work that we have to do, and trying to do things correctly. It's super challenging.
All right, our next question comes from Michelle. How can you tell if it's day or night in space?
Yeah, it's cool being up there. So we're going around, the Earth, 17,500 miles an hour. We're, cruising around. And so about every 45 minutes, the sun will come up. And then 45 minutes later, the sun goes down. And so, in an hour and a half, you have a full kind of what we would call a day cycle. And so if you are not looking out the window, you you have no idea if it's day or night. And so we live off of Greenwich Mean Time, and that's we set our watch to that, and that's 6 o'clock. That's what 6 o'clock in the morning is. And then of course the people that are supporting us in Houston, it's a little bit earlier. Those that are supporting from Russia, it's a little bit later in the day. So we're going off of that, and around 10 p.m. at night on my watch, okay, it's time for me to get ready for bed. But you don't have that same rhythm that you do here, where the sun comes up and then okay, it came up at 6 today. It might go down around 6 or 7. So you definitely don't have that. So if you didn't look out the window, you would have no idea if it's day or night. And when you do look out the window, if it's dark outside, it still could be your morning time. So it's just a weird way of thinking about day and night. It's not about what you see outside. It's about what your watch tells you is the time of day.
That makes sense. Thank you. Our next question comes from Alice. Do you think your U.S. Marine military experience helped with some of the aspects of astronaut training, such as the centrifuge machine, the human spinning, or was that entirely unique to your astronaut training?
So the centrifuge itself, that is, for me, was very unique to being an astronaut. Folks that maybe were pilots before they came here, they may have had experience with that, but with what I did in the Marine Corps, did not, apply directly to what we do as an astronaut. But I can say that the experience that I got as a Marine definitely helped me, and it still helps me today. Going through boot camp, super challenging. And you're pushing yourself, like I said. So you're doing things that you didn't think you could do. So when you come out of that, you feel very confident about your capabilities. So you learn that. You learn how to work as a team, which is what we do every day out here. You learn how to be a leader. You learn how to be a follower. You learn how to be aware of your surroundings. And so a lot of the skills that we use in the military, those definitely apply to being an astronaut. So I think for me, I would be a different astronaut today if I didn't have that Marine Corps experience. And, it's not required, but I thought it was for me really, really good. And I learned a lot about myself being a Marine that I can use today.
Rochelle asks, is there a gym on the space station?
Yeah, there totally is a kind of a gym. We don't have one module that has everything, but we do have to work out for about 2 hours every day. And so that is on our schedule in that kind of 12 hours that I was talking about. And so we do an hour of cardio kind of work. So we have a treadmill in space, which is interesting because as you saw, we float in space. So obviously, how do you run? So we have this really, it's a great, looks like a treadmill. It's an engineering wonder. But to hold you down, you put on a harness over your shoulders, and then you have like bungee cords that are connected to the treadmill. Um, and then you connect that to your harness. So these cords are pulling you down onto the treadmill, and then you have different links. And so the fewer the number of links, the harder you're being pulled onto the treadmill. So when you first get there, you might have 6 links on your harness. And after you've been there for a while, you might go down to 3 or 2. So it just makes it feel like there's more kind of pressure on your shoulders. So that's how you run in space. If you were to, watch me running in space, you would look at me and it looks like I'm running on the wall. But when I'm running, you can't tell, what's up and what's down. So, that's pretty cool. And it really feels like you're running on a treadmill. And then we also have a stationary bike. But to use that so you don't float away is we have the clip-in pedals like we have on bikes today. You don't need a seat because you're just kind of floating, and so you pedal, and there's no seat that you need. So that's how we get our cardiovascular stuff. And then we have a resistive exercise device, which is very, very cool. And it has these pistons, and so that's what causes the resistance that we use. And it's like a universal machine, so you can do squats, deadlifts, all kinds of things for your legs. And then you kind of fold it, and then you can do a bench press, you can do a shoulder press, you can do curls. Uh, so you actually come back now from space almost stronger than when you left because we all try to work out, but you don't have time in your day. Where in space, they give you time to work out every day. So it's pretty cool. And if we didn't do that, um, we would have issues with our muscles, issues with our bones. And so we have found that it's really important to work out every day so that we do come back, at least as strong with our muscles and our bones as when we left. So it's a very important part of our day is working out in space.
For our next question, Tina asks, how does being in space affect your mood? And I think you already answered the day and night question. And then she also asked, do you use a special mood light?
Yeah, so the mood for me, I love it. I mean, 'cause I like being in space, so it makes me happy. So it keeps my mood right where it needs to be. But I can see it being challenging for people, being in a remote environment. So we do have a lot of psychological support while we're in space. We get to talk to our families on a video conference like this once a week. So that's super important. We do meet with our psychologist, psychiatrist every couple of weeks and just, how are things going? So mental health is really something that NASA takes seriously. And we do, we talk about things, and that's important to do. Um, we have an awesome telephone up there where you can call anywhere in the world, but nobody can call you. So it's pretty sweet. And so all those things kind of help with your psychological well-being. We can have movies sent up, um, and so that's kind of the mood. And then the second part What was that?
She asked, do you use a special mood light?
Oh yeah, so yeah, thanks. So the lighting, that's also it's important, and we do have lights on the space station that when you wake up, you hit a certain light that is, a little bit more bright. It's kind of like if you have your phone and you hit that night mode before you go to bed, it changes the lighting on your phone. So we do have lights like that on the space station so that you can kind of get your body into this rhythm of, okay, in the morning it's brighter like it would be with the sun, and then at night you can dim those lights. So there's been a lot of research that talks about lighting and its effect on people's moods and how well they sleep. So yep, we do have some of that up there.
Wow, that sounds so cool. Um, but for our next question, Aaron asks, on a lighter note, what is your response when someone says it's not rocket science as an astronaut?
I would say it's totally rocket science. So everything we do here to get to space, it's all about rocket science. But we use that expression a lot, as well. When something is simple, there are some things that we do are simple. It's like, dude, that ain't rocket science, man. So I love that. I love that phrase, and I think it's cool that people might not know exactly what it means, but it just shows this kind of interest in space, and people realize that it is hard to get into space, and rocket science is really, really tough. And so, yeah, I think it's funny when I hear it. Either that or when I hear Houston, we have a problem. Those are the best.
Madeline asks, in your opinion, would it be more beneficial to study something in the realm of aerospace with a goal of being an astronaut in mind?
I don't think that hurts. So you kind of saw my path where I was a geologist, school teacher, and that's how I got here. But when you look at the astronauts that we have, we have pilots, we have other folks from the military, we have medical doctors, we have engineers, mathematicians. So we have a wide range of individuals that get hired. The one thing is that we're all in the STEM fields: the science, technology, engineering, and math. And so I would recommend, if you have that goal of becoming an astronaut, working for NASA, there's a lot of different jobs here. So I would pick one that you really, really like. I wouldn't study aeronautics if you hated it just to become an astronaut. So that's a great field, and we definitely need people like that. But only do it if you really, really enjoy it.
Thank you. Nicole asks, why do some experiments need to be done in space rather than on Earth?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the only reason we have the space station is to conduct science. I mean, that's the main reason why we have it. And what's interesting is that there's a lot of experiments that we do up there that you really can't do on Earth. And so we'll conduct an experiment on Earth. We might be doing something similar in space, and you can learn a lot either about how we live and work in space. For example, we do a lot of work looking at how flames and fires behave in space, and that of course helps us to protect ourselves in space. But we also use information that we get from the space experiments to improve either our modeling that we use on Earth. But when you look at growing things like crystals and proteins, on Earth, they're limited because of the force of gravity. But because we're constantly falling and it feels like you don't have gravity, even though we do, things can grow there that we couldn't grow on Earth. And then scientists can look at that and understand better the structure of those molecules, and that helps them, make better medicines here on Earth. So there's just a lot that we do um, up in space because of that microgravity environment that's, again, helpful for us as we explore space, but most of it is to improve what we're doing here on Earth. So it's pretty cool to see the experiments that we're doing up there. And NASA publishes all of that, so I would look into kind of the stuff that we do in space, and you can see why we do it there and how we're using it back here on Earth.
Thank you. The next question comes from Alice, and it's kind of long, so I'm going to read it and we can revisit it if needed. So, on a more serious note, you became the first person of Puerto Rican descent to become part of the select few to the NASA astronaut team. Did you ever encounter any obstacles or setbacks in terms of being a person of color going into the space industry? And if so, how did you overcome those obstacles, barriers? And do you feel you have to adhere to a stricter moral code to be a good role model? And were your colleagues respectful, and were your ideas being heard?
Whoa, that's a good question. Yeah, so there is a lot there. So, I think there's lots of challenges out there. Definitely, people of color. There are obstacles and things that we have to overcome. There might be prejudice that we've experienced. I think for me in particular, I'm kind of the first generation, and so I was always caught in between the Puerto Rican culture and then trying to blend into Southern California, at the time, and so most of my friends were white in the neighborhood that I grew up in, but in my house, it was, puro Boricua, all Puerto Rican inside there. And so, you're kind of caught in between. My Spanish isn't great because my parents wanted me, to be fluent in English, and they thought, it could be detrimental if I'm speaking a second language. And so you're constantly in this battle. And so I think there's always going to be obstacles, but I wouldn't use those as an excuse. Where getting my master's degree at the University of Arizona, it was a minority scholarship that was given by an oil company, and so that really opened a door for me that I would not have had otherwise, because I couldn't have afforded to go and get that degree. So um, I think we should recognize that there are obstacles, but also realize that you can't use those as an excuse, and that you also want to look at the opportunities that might afford you. So, I think it can go either way. But when I came to NASA, I didn't feel like that was being held against me at all. We are a pretty diverse group, and so that wasn't really a problem. And then the last part about the moral code, I think it's probably all of us, everybody listening today, you have people that are looking up to you, whether it's your younger brother or sister, it could be one of your another classmate. And so I think anytime you have people that are looking up to you for whatever the reason is, you do have a certain obligation to behave, in a good, moral way, whatever that definition is for you. So, being an astronaut, it's a little bit more high profile than other jobs, but it's not much different than me being a school teacher, where I have 150 students a day that I'm interacting with, and they're looking up to me as a school teacher. So I don't think it's a lot different. I think we all just try to be the best person that we can, and just always think about, am I doing the right thing? And being an astronaut, I don't think is any different.
Sophia asks, is there an instrument or technology that you would like to see made better for a mission, and it would be her goal to make that better for you?
Oh man, sweet! Come work for us at NASA. There's a lot. There's a lot that we need. One thing that we were just talking about the other day are spacesuits. The spacesuits are hard to make, and like I said, doing a spacewalk is really difficult. So I think making a new spacesuit and improving on spacesuits would be something pretty cool. A lot of work to be done there. But as we look to go, back to the moon, on to Mars, we have tons of challenges. How are we going to get there? What's the propulsion going to be like? Um, Radiation is a big problem that we have when we're in space for a long time. So how do you minimize that effect that it has on humans while they're traveling in space. So, man, the list is long. Going to space is hard. And even though we've been doing it for, over 50 years, there's still a lot that we have to learn. There's a lot of cool internships that NASA has. And so if you're looking to solve a problem, I would look into some of those internships and come out here and work. Doesn't matter what your interest is. Again, NASA does a lot of different things. It's not just the scientist and the astronaut. So, yeah, you might want to look into that and, yeah, come on over and make yourself famous and make space better.
Alyssa asked if you've had any alien encounters.
No, I would say not that I can tell you, but then people might take that seriously. No, I have not. Unfortunately, I have not had any. But if I did have one, I would definitely share it with everybody because that'd be sweet.
Rochelle asked, were you in space or do you know someone that was when COVID started? And how did that affect you?
I was not in space, but I definitely know people that are up there now that were dealing with COVID when it first happened. And I know people that have gone up and they've come back, and it was a big deal for the crew members in training because a lot of the training we do is hands-on, and we're working with instructors. And now, kind of like you all have to do, it's a lot of remote learning, which we hadn't done before, or you're keeping your distance from the instructor, so that's challenging. You don't want to launch into space sick, and so the quarantine guidelines are really, really strict, and you got to be super careful. And then even more on the kind of the psychological side, we had people that were launching and their family couldn't be there because we weren't able to fly them, out to Russia, and so you kind of have that as well. So I think there's been a lot of challenges, for the astronauts as they get ready to go, but it's again not different than I think all of the challenges we've all had to face, whether you're in school, in any other job where you're trying to stay healthy, you're trying to stay connected to your family and friends. But I think NASA as a whole has done a pretty good job.
Thank you. And then we know you spoke about having scheduled time for the gym. Do you have personal time scheduled or are you constantly working?
So they don't like put personal time on our schedule, which would be sweet if they did that. That's a great idea. So, you kind of make your personal time. So after 7, you got to make dinner. You got to kind of look at the schedule for the day. And then I try to go to bed around 10 p.m. so I could get up at 6 and get my 8 hours of sleep. And so, you try to find, some time at the end of the day that you can make your personal time on the weekends. We kind of get them off, but on Saturdays you got to clean the space station. You still have to work out, so you might get part of the day that is considered free, and then Sundays were usually a little bit more free. So you do find time to relax and enjoy what you're doing, and I think like any job, if you're working 7 days a week, you're just not going to be healthy. And so they know that, and they try to give us a break so that we can get the rest that we need, but then we can also mentally kind of unwind a little bit. But they don't schedule personal time.
Do you have time for one more question, Joe? Okay, so we'll combine this. Someone's asking if you like watching space-themed movies and what's your favorite. And then in particular, if you have watched The Martian and did they get the science right?
Yeah, so I love space themed movies. Uh, I'm old, and so I always, go back old school to Star Wars. To me, it's just the great classics. But I like them all because I think they're cool. And some people I've heard engineers go, I couldn't watch that movie; it was horrible. It wasn't scientifically correct. It's like, well, dude, this is it's a Hollywood movie. I mean, it's not, you're not in school trying to get everything right. So, I think you need to realize that, most of the movies are meant to be fun and are not always scientifically, engineering, mathematically correct. The Martian is an interesting one. I think there's a lot of good science in the Martian, but it's not all totally accurate. So I think you got to look at it and enjoy the parts that are. If you're into that, try to dissect the parts that are accurate. But the rest of it, just enjoy it for what it is. A Hollywood movie. But no, I love them, and every time they come out, I think it's great because it gets people thinking about space and what we're doing, and even if it's totally stuff we could never do, I think it's still fun to watch, and it makes us dream and think about things that we wouldn't otherwise think about. So I'm a big fan.
Thank you. Well, we really, really appreciate you coming to speak with us today. We've been very excited to host this event. If anybody would like to follow you, how can they get a hold of you or follow you?
That's a good question. I think I have a Twitter account out there somewhere.
Twitter?
I
I
think.
will send it out if I can find
All
it.
right. It's more active as I'm getting ready to go into space. But there's definitely an at NASA astronaut type Twitter page that it's just not me, but all the astronauts, and you can look at the folks that are up in space, and they all have various social media accounts. So yeah, if you're into that, there's definitely a lot out there that you can follow to see what we're doing at NASA, and then to see what the individual astronauts are doing. And thanks for inviting me. I kind of feel I wish we were in person, but I know we couldn't do that. But it's nice to talk to people that are right where I grew up, and so thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Absolutely. We really appreciate it. And if anybody would like to send the recording of this to their friend or review it, we will be posting it on our Fullerton College Associated Students page. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you again, Joe, and everyone that made this possible. We really appreciate it. It was an excellent talk.
Thank you very much. Take
Thank
care.
you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.